Hi, everybody. This video is going to go over how you can look up the annual growth targets and also the stretch growth targets in iReady based on the diagnostic scores. So from Clever, you go to iReady, and then you click on reports, and this report should be run after the student has taken the iReady diagnostic for the second or third time, because the diagnostic in September acts as a baseline, and this report's going to show how much the student has grown from the first diagnostic in September to the next administration of the diagnostic. In this case, the second one we took at the end of January, beginning of February. So go to Diagnostic Growth and click on Math, and then the subject will default to Math. The class report group has all of my math students, but I can click on any individual period that I want to look at. And the comparison diagnostic is always the most recent diagnostic compared to that baseline in September. Now, progress to annual typical growth median. So what iReady's done is they've taken all of their data from a couple years ago across the country, and by grade level, they saw what the typical median growth was from the beginning of the year diagnostic to the end of the year diagnostic. And you can see that my students have already made 71% of that typical growth from that first diagnostic to where they should be at the end of the year. That's good, because we're about halfway through the year. So that means they've already kind of surpassed that 50%. And so they're on their way to maybe even surpassing 100% growth, more than what is typical according to iReady's national data. Now I'm going to hide the individual students because typically we're going to be looking at individual students here. And you can see that the student here has their annual typical growth column and their annual stretch growth column. Their baseline placement and scale score, this is their score in September on the diagnostic. Their current placement and scale score, this is their most recent diagnostic administration. Okay, annual typical growth, like I said, that is what that median growth is by grade level for all the students across the entire nation. And you can see that the amount that we should see annually is 9 points, a 9-point increase. Now, if you look at this particular student, their first score was 524, their most recent was 562. So they went up 38 points. So they far surpassed what was typical for growth throughout the entire year. In fact, they're 422% of the typical growth. Now you might say, well, that must be because Mr. Plunkett's an incredible teacher, but I don't think that's what it is. I think more likely than not, the student didn't put forth their best effort on their first test. And then when it counted for placement, then they were like, ooh, I better start carrying and working more on this. Or they have a tutor, or they're taking outside classes, or who knows what. But that can account for that huge increase. Now, the annual stretch growth is different than the annual typical growth, because the stretch growth is, from iReady's perspective, any student who scores below grade level. The stretch growth is how much they would have to grow to get onto grade level, or if they already scored on grade level, how much would they have to, stretch their growth in order to get to advanced. So you can see that this stretch growth was 21. That's more than the typical growth. We're stretching for even more growth, and this student even surpassed that. And like I said, that could be because they didn't do as well on the first diagnostic as they could have. Now, at the top here, you see all these students who've grown a lot. That's all well and good. But as I've looked at district data, we have a lot of these. About 20 to 30% of students actually go down, negative growth from diagnostic to diagnostic. So a minute ago, I was feeling like I was an amazing teacher. Now I feel like I'm a terrible teacher. What's happening here? We can all grow as teachers, sure, but this is not necessarily a reflection of anything that you did. In fact, it's probably not. More likely than not, what's happened is when students take the iReady diagnostic, it's testing all 4 domains. Our curriculum is organized so it focuses on specific domains for the first part of the year, let's say. Typically, it focuses on algebra and number sense. So those students who were doing decent on something like measurement and statistics, they haven't seen a lot of that stuff in a long time. They may not have done as well on those questions 4 months later. And so iReady goes, oh, they're not as good anymore. And they may have increased or so on algebra or whatever else. And so then you get an average out that might be a little bit lower than they were before. Now, it could also be because the student wasn't putting forth their best effort, or they've been absent, or any number of reasons that may have happened. For us teachers, I think the best thing is to know who these students are so we can keep an eye on them and continue to give them the support that they need to succeed. Thank you all so much.